Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update for September of 2022. I've got 8 more albums to talk about, some requests, some new stuff, some stuff I was checking out from my back burner, whole lot of stuff to talk about, so let's go ahead and get going.
When I'm tired of shit I'm facing, cause it's not only mine, got everybody's situations that I got.
I started my month by finally checking out the new Conway the Machine album, God Don't Make Mistakes. It's been getting a lot of hype in the scene, and I've been seeing a lot of people just putting it up as one of the best of the year. And the biggest reason why I hadn't even gotten to it yet is because unlike Westside Gunn and Benny the Butcher, the other two members of Griselda, I listened to Conway the least. In fact, this is my first real solo outing of his that I'm checking out. I've heard his features, I've heard him here and there, and I like his stuff that I've heard, but like I've never done a full, deep excursion, and I know the least about him. But this record really is pretty much as good as everyone has said it is. You know, it's surprisingly, I guess, following the same steps that a lot of hip-hop that I've loved this year has done, and the fact that it tackles themes of introspection and reflecting on oneself in a very real-feeling way, you know? The big difference between God Don't Make Mistakes and records like Kendrick's, Denzel's, and JID's is that Conway takes like a real dark, morbid look at it in a way that I really like, but was kind of interesting to see, given this year has been very self-care feeling oriented, or at least self-help oriented in hip-hop. You know, while there are tracks like Guilty, Chanel Pearls, and Stress that kind of talk about those themes of reflection and the stresses of being where you are in the scene, he also takes a really darker look at it. You know, there are lines of Lock Loaded, I think it's Tear Gas, where he talks about his own death and mortality. You know, he talks about the end of his life almost in ways that I don't think those other artists are, and I actually really appreciate seeing that. I think that it's interesting to see an artist go to that side of the realms in a way that I don't think feels in the same light of when like David Bowie did it on like Black Star, but there's this like sense of dread coding a lot of this record that I think is honestly kind of an interesting twist on what people have been doing by and large this year in hip-hop. You know, a lot of the beats on here are really well produced. You know, there's a smoothness to it that I think Conway and his collaborators handle very, very well. You know, Tear Gas, going back to that track, I think Lil Wayne goes hard on that song. I feel like this has been a great year for Wayne features by and large, but I think he sounds great on that cut. I actually think T.I. and Novell sound really good on Wild Chapters. That's another song that kind of leads into some of the morbid side of the reflection that I think Conway's been going through. Obviously, John Woo Flick slaps because it's got Westside Gunn and Benny coming together with him on a really fucking cold-ass beat. This is a well-rounded, well-constructed hip-hop record that, in the vein of a lot of what I've liked this year, continues to hit a good stride, and I would argue acts as another good notch in the belt for the genre. You know, I don't know what the rest of his catalog sounds like, but I think that this is a really good release in my opinion. I think that his wordplay is insane. His storytelling and image painting on tracks like Chanel Pearls is insanely dense and well put together. You know, I feel like he does a really good job of putting you in his shoes on a track like Drum Work, where he talks about the work that he's put in amidst the stresses that have been the world over the last couple of years. And I feel like, by and large, this project is a great showcasing of Conway's ability to spin some good bars. You know, the production on here is well suited to a lot of the subject matter that he's covering, and there's a good balance across it all. And I think that if you like a lot of where hip-hop has been this year from a lyrical, thematic perspective, this is another good release in that vein that I feel like you would enjoy if you haven't spun it yet. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. I think it's very, very good. I think it's a bit too short. I feel like it kind of flies through its runtime in ways that I wasn't expecting because there's a lot of quality here, but really good stuff. I would listen to God Don't Make Mistakes. I think that it's another quality release in a year that's had, again, been stacked with some fucking jams.
Twice upon a time there was a boy who died. Don't you dare laugh, cause that boy.
Now, if you guys have caught any of the videos I've talked about for anticipated stuff from this year, I've been looking forward to this Meechy Darko solo album, Gothic Luxury, ever since it was announced it was happening, because you guys know I fuck with Flatbush heavy, and I think that Meechy Darko is an incredible artist within that group, and I was very curious to see what a solo outing from him would look like, and I feel like he's released this well-titled, well-thought-out project that has a lot of what I like from his Flatbush Zombie stuff, but in a much more hefty prominence with some good collaborations in the midst as well, you know. And he uses these Gothic-tinged backdrops to really talk about lavishness, excess in a lot of different facets, whether it's talking about his drug binges or the excess that he's lived in that aspect, like on Never Forgetting, or Lavish Habits, Gothica, and Get Lit or Die Trying. He talks about the luxury that he's got in his life, or the luxury he seeks, like on Prada U, which is a darker flip on the imagery that may come with Prada. Same with the MoMA. There's some real gritty imagery in the bars on there. I think that's a fantastic collaboration with Black Thought. Same with Hennessy and Halos. It's another track that talks about huge successes. You know, he juxtaposes and compares himself to other very prolific and popular black figures, or while also talking about the expensive art he wants to have in his own house. There's some real dips into that luxury that the title would evoke, you know, while not losing sight of talking about some real shit, like on Kill Us All, where he talks about the systemic racial profiling that happens to black people, you know, comparing white punishment to black punishment. You know, I feel like he gets dark with it as well, like on Cursed. You know, I feel like this record, by and large, is a pretty solid outing because it kind of sticks the landing in a lot of the ideas that it wants to devolve into. You know, do I think everything is aces? No, but I think a lot of this does work really well. You know, I think some of the production, like I said, isn't always aces. I wish some of the collaborations were a little better. You know, when I saw the track Lost Souls, I was geeked as fuck because I like Denzel. He's had a really good year. I think a Denzel Busta collaboration sounds awesome as fuck, and it's not quite what I was hoping it would be. You know, for every MoMA or On God, another really well done track, a collaboration with Freddie Gibbs where Meechy just gets real dark with it. There's also a Cursed. You know, for as much as I like Meechy on Cursed, I don't think that whole collaboration is one of my favorites either. I think it comes early on in the track listing, and it's a track that I don't mind because I like the production on it, but I think the track as a whole, it doesn't wow me as much as others on the project. I don't know. There's a lot of solid ideas on here. There's a lot that I do like, and I enjoy that. Again, he just went all in on the concept, on the idea, on everything he wanted to pull with it. I just kind of wish it was a little more consistent. There were some elements that I kind of wish were done a little better. But it's still solid. If you like Flatbush, listen to this. You'll probably like a lot of what it has to offer. And I think that he does have some real shit he wants to say, and he says it very well. It's still getting a 7 from me. This is a solid-ass album, and I think it's worth your time. Now, if you guys caught the bands I saw at Riot Fest video, I mentioned I was going to be covering this Holy Fawn album in this video because they were one of the bands I saw live at the festival, and I had sampled some of this album prior to seeing them live, and I've been listening to it post seeing them live because, one, they put on an incredible show, and two, along with the samples of Dimensional Bleed that I'd heard in tandem with their, first album, I love what these guys have going on sonically. You know, they have this bleak, dark, lyrical backdrop that feels drenched in tragedy while having this sonic palette that is a cocktail of shoegazy airiness with this lo-fi edge that leads to some incredibly dense, heavy breakdowns that I think are excellently pulled off. You know, there are so many pockets on this album where it feels like a slow burn, smaller shoegaze starting track that leads into a following track that continues that energy while building to this incredible heaviness that just washes over me with delight. You know, the opening crawl of Hexzone and Death is Relief, even Lift Your Head kind of continues that energy tenfold. You know, Amaranthine into the title track is an incredible fucking drop with some actual, what feels like tragedy in the lyrics. You know, I love a lot of what this band has going on. I love the production style. You know, I mentioned that it kind of has this lo-fi touch, but like the drums on Amaranthine, the sort of lo-fi production on the closer Blood Memory has this sort of feel of like rough demos that have been polished ever so slightly to give the listener a little more insight into the scenario that the band is playing with. You know, these longer tracks that this band are toying with on tracks like Void of Light lend to this melding of beauty and density that I really love to see. You know, I think that these guys know how to toy with atmosphere and create this mood that lets the listener settle into the darkness before the heaviness just wraps around them and buries them in the sadness of it all. This album is incredible. And I'm glad this album rips as much as it does, because it's so easy for this melding of shoegaze influence with some real potent metal heaviness can come off as either passé, or the mixing may not be quite all that harmonious. You know, it's easy for this sort of recipe to fail or to just turn out so bland. But I feel like these guys really channel some great shit here. I feel like if you've enjoyed what some bands like Loathe and Deaf Heaven have done in their highs, these guys create this sort of tangential atmosphere that really lets you sit in the sadness in a way that I enjoy. I think this album is incredible. Giving it an 8 out of 10. I think it's fantastic. And again, if you can see them live, do so, because holy shit, they fucking kill it. To say I was excited for this Rina Sawayama sophomore album, Hold the Girl, is an understatement. I thought that her last album was easily one of the best pop records of the year that it came out. I thought it was a good hodgepodge melding of like 2000s nostalgia with some bops at their core, and given 2000s nostalgia feels like it's very much in fashion now, I was curious as to where Rina Sawayama would take her sound amidst that. And I feel like this album is what Sawayama could have been in ways that I don't like. Do I hate this album though? No. I just feel like it's definitely much more of a mixed bag than her last album in ways that are definitely a bit more disappointing, but still have some tracks that stand out as some of my favorites that have dropped this year, frustratingly enough. You know, I feel like the opener, Minor Feelings, Slow Burn, actually does a good job at setting the stage and welcomes the listener into the title track, Hold the Girl, incredibly well. That song in particular showing off a component of the sound that I think Rina Sawayama consistently sticks the landing on, and the fact that she's injecting a lot more of a dance-driven atmosphere akin to what like Charlie XCX was doing on Crash or Gaga was doing on Chromatica. Tracks like Holy, Till You Let Me Go, and The Closer to Be Alive capture that sound just as well and continue to create this dance-driven pocket that I eat up every single time. I also feel like This Hell presents that sort of hodgepodge style that was on Sawayama and sticks the landing on. There's a little bit more of a twang, and in a way that doesn't feel like 2000s nostalgia and more feels like late 90s nostalgia in a way that I enjoy hearing, and I think that, again, she injects those ideas well with the songwriting that complements it, you know, spitting in the face of what the industry did to certain pop stars in a way that I really love to see a bold stance on. I also think tracks like Your Age and Hurricanes continue those ideas very amicably. I also love fucking Frankenstein. That might be like my pop song of the year. I love how forceful and upfront it is, how throttling that tune is, and how catchy that hook is. There's some real power behind that track that I honestly kind of wish was done more on the project, because some of the moments where she gets dense or, you know, tries these more belting sentiments in a ballad-esque sense fall a little flat in my opinion in some instances. Not always, but a handful of them do. You know, I think the one moment where I feel like the power does feel felt in a soft, intimate, or like in a ballad-esque way is on Phantom. You know, I think the songwriting in that song is actually well done, even though the whole Ghost, Old Lover parallel has been done a lot in pop music. I think Rina Sawayama does it well, and I think that the guitar solo in that song, chef's kiss. I love the power in that song. She sounds incredible on it, and I think that it is easily my favorite soft moment on the record by and large, that I think matches the energy, or at least matches the intensity that a track like Frankenstein builds to. Tracks like Catch Me in the Air and Imagining feel like both the contemporarization done wrong and the 2000s production style nostalgia done wrong in a way that artists like Pale Waves did on their latest record. I don't know. I like components of this record a decent amount, but I definitely am leaving this album a little less warm than I was Sawayama. I'm not eating the whole thing up by and large like I was that project. Do I still like it? Yeah, but I am definitely walking away a bit more let down. I'm giving it a 6. It's solid as hell. I liked it a lot initially when I was first spinning it. This is one of the albums that John and I listened to while we were in Chicago. And the more that I spent with it on my own, the more disappointed I really was by how some of the production ideas fell a little flat, and some of the adaptations into modern ideas didn't work as well as they may have on her last album, or as I was hoping they would, given how well Rina Sawayama is at creating a good tune. But it's still a solid-ass record. I feel like you could walk away from this picking some songs out that you'll enjoy, or you may even like it more than I do if you enjoy her last album. You may still like it more than I do, but I still think it's solid, and I still think it's definitely worth your time, if only because there are some real bops on here that I still can't put down.
What's that sound? There's a funny man at my door.
You know, actors doing music is always kind of an interesting subject to talk about, because there's varying degrees of acceptance within certain circles of music as to it being, like, having enough cred, as it were. And to Joe Keery's credit, he was an artist, or he was a musician before he was an actor, and I feel like that definitely shows in some of the ideas on his sophomore outing, Decide, an album that I checked out with John. It was one of the ones that he and I spun together while we were in Chicago, but it's definitely the one that's honestly kind of hung around with me more than anything else we listened to over the weekend. And it's not even something that I like the most, as you have seen, but like, I enjoy a lot of the ideas on here. I'm a sucker for a good synth groove. I like some of the funky adjacent ideas on here. I do feel like he does wear his influences a bit too heavily on his sleeve, especially the Tame Impala influence, and I could already know that that's going to turn a handful of people that may watch my videos away. But I think that he melds that influence with like his own ideas, and, you know, adapting from artists like the Talking Heads and Daft Punk pretty successfully on this project. You know, whether he's doing these synth flourish embellishments like on the opener Runner, or on Half-Life, or on Change, these songs that have a bit more kineticism to them, or have these great bombastic moments like in Half-Life. I really like Half-Life. The drum work on that song is fucking great. I think that he, again, has this earnestness to the writing that comes across on tracks like that and On very well. I think I like that he doesn't take himself too seriously and tangential to that. You know, tracks like Gloom and Fool have me fucking cracking up. I like the catty pettiness on Gloom, and I love the vocal performance on Fool and on Climax. The like vocal modulation stuff on there is really fun, and it's quirky, it's a little off kilter, and I enjoy that about it. You know, he wears his influences a bit too heavily, but I think that it works in some instances for him better than it may have for other people. I think this project is honestly really, really solid. I think that he does a good job at, you know, talking about matters that may concern him, like doom scrolling, like on On, or sort of reflections on his place in the world, like on Climax. You know, my biggest walk away from this album, the more that I've sat with it, is I do wish that there was a little more here. It's a pretty short record. It's only about 36 minutes in length, and there are some ideas on here that I would just love to have seen more of. You know, the synth flourishment on Is That All It Takes, I feel like could have been definitely extended into its own dance-driven nature. You know, that's something that Kevin Parker does do a lot, that I feel like he could have done his own version of very well. And I feel like the closer, Slither, has a really good groove that I wish he did more with. But the stuff here that works, I think works pretty fucking well. And I think that oddly enough, it's definitely worth your time if you're into synth grooves, if you're into synth music, and you want to hear what Joe Keery from Stranger Things does musically. It's worth your time. I'm giving this a 7. It's honestly very, very solid. Again, similarly to Rina Sawayama, there's probably going to be a song on here that's going to be on my Songs of the Year list, because I think that there's some really fucking good stuff here, especially given the genre that it is. You know, when At the Drive-In came back, I had been waiting with bated breath for this moment for so fucking long. Like I said in my Mars Volta discography review, I'm a pretty big fan of this band. And while this self-titled album is definitely a hard pivot into very different territories for Cedric and Omar with this project, I welcome it with open arms. Partially because while, yes, I think it's a little weird to see the Mars Volta craft just a handful of songs that sit in like the 3-4 minute mark, I'm okay with it. Partially because, one, I think the songwriting on this record is still aces. There's a lot of use of thematics, of discussion of death. There's this morbid sheen to this pop-fueled record that I think suits the band well. And in fact, I think that they take it a step further by exploring death, not just in like a physical sense. There definitely feels like there is this looming sense of death and loss that kind of lingers as the album goes on. You know, by the time Palmful of Crux comes around, there's this sense of reflection, as if it's an ongoing experience that's happening within the POV of the album. But there's a dissection of culture. There's a look at one's culture. You know, the instrumental palette of this isn't just a straightforward pop album. There's a lot of like Latin accompaniment that I would again see the Mars Volta tapping into on a record like this, that I think they handle incredibly well with what they've got going on here. You know, I think the production on this record is fantastic. But there's a look at culture and the death of it and the homogenization of oneself amidst the place that we live, at least here in America. And I think that it's a well-articulated concept, loose concept. It's a well-articulated, loose concept that I think the band pulls off gracefully. You know, I think the pacing of this record as well is really incredibly done. You know, I think that the tightness and again the vibrancy that this album kind of opens on with Black Light Shine into Graveyard Love is incredible. You know, I think Cedric sounds insanely good on a lot of this record. I love the pockets that are found on Graveyard Love and Blank Condolences. You know, I think the more lower key moments like Short Story and Tourmaline are also just as well handled. You know, again, like I said, the injections of Latin accompaniment works really well. Hell, the interlude track, Que Dios te maldiga mi corazón, I kind of wish there was more of, because I enjoy that sort of deviation, that hard deviation from even just the tight-knit grooves or, again, not necessarily pop embellishments, but pop sounds that code a lot of this album that I kind of wish would have helped, that I think would have helped further cement some of those thematics a bit better. You know, I feel like the back half of the record doesn't necessarily abandon that, but it definitely embraces more synthetic uses and stuff that I think suit the sonic palette. You know, they give it sort of a trip-hop adjacent feel, but I'm definitely wishing that there was almost a bigger doubling down on it. You know, while I kind of miss the longer, more drawn-out jams, I feel like this is an album with a purpose, and I think it fulfills that purpose really amicably. You know, I don't think every idea works on here. I think No Case Gain might be one of the weaker songs I've heard from the band by and large. And I think Collapsible Shoulders' minimal atmosphere really leaves a lot to be desired as a listener, especially given it comes so late in the album. But when this album hits a good stride, I think it rises into the sunset masterfully. And I feel like, while I've seen some people be really kind to this record, I also think that this album has seen some really meddling reception that I don't think it wholly deserves. Just because it is vastly different doesn't mean it's bad. And I think it's honestly very, very solid. It's not, I don't know if it's going to be that high on my reformatted discography review of the band, but I've honestly been looking at their discography review, reevaluating their discography by and large, and might retool their review in a completely different way than other bands that I've done. But I'm sitting with this album at a 7. I think that it's very, very solid. It evokes the same energy that it happens when other prog bands decide to streamline a bit. But I think that similarly to bands like Rush, or even Steely Dan in some regards, they stick the landing more often than not when it comes to making a streamlined Mars Volta project. It definitely still has the spirit in a lot of its lyrical themes and its tone, and again, its use of Latin accompaniment definitely feels at home with pockets of the discography. It's just a bit different. And I could see it be disengaging with people, but I don't think it's as bad as some may paint it out to be. This new Without Waves album, Comedian, was a request by Rockin' Movies with Tyler, and they're a prog metal band that definitely has inspiration from artists like the Dillinger Escape Plan, especially with the guitar production. I even hear a little bit of Static X influence, if that makes any sense, with how some of their bite for their guitars sound, and their vocalist whisper style vocals sound less like he's trying to tap into like what Mike Patton was doing with his time in the band, or Greg Puciato, and more feels like he's trying to get a little more growly into there in a way that I think it accomplishes what I think it's trying to do. My biggest issue with this record is, while I feel like it gets off on a decent foot, you know, the first couple of tracks, Good Grief and Animal Kingdom, are alright. I even think some of the intensity with tracks like Set and Setting and Do What Scares You come across pretty well. When this band tries to switch it up or pivot into other realms within songs, or create these sort of odd ideas within this record, it just kind of falls flat for me personally and leaves me heavily uninterested. In fact, I think a lot of the back half in this record, by and large, is kind of boring and bland. You know, I feel like the strongest components of this album are definitely the guitars, that influence in the whirlwind zaniness that, again, a band like Dillinger brought to the table, comes across pretty amicably. I think the drummer's alright as well, and he can definitely match the pocket of intensity that a lot of the band is firing in. I just think that a lot of the vocal work's kind of boring. The clean vocals especially, I think, are kind of dull. They're kind of bland. I feel like once this band tries to dip into like airier, atmospheric soundscapes, unlike what I said about that Holy Fawn record, this band does not really wear that kind of sound well, in my opinion, and I think it's a lot more dull. I think that a track like Algorithm, with this, like, again, sort of weird cyclical nature to its songwriting, I think it's just kind of boring. And that's kind of my biggest issue with this record, is that when it's not like actually being an engaging listen, I think it's just kind of boring as sin. You know, some of these songs go on for a little too long. They don't really do much with some of the movements that they want to put on display. And I don't know. I feel like this is less a record that feels like a prog album that's trying to aim for the fences, and feels like a prog album with a lot of sonic fluff that doesn't really engage with me as a listener, nor does it really excite me and make me want to come back. I feel like every time I listen to this record especially, I find myself switching it up, again, by the halfway point. By the time Slade and Shadows comes in, I feel like I'm already ready for this album to kind of be done. I don't know. It's not bad. It's not like a poorly constructed record. It's just, as a fan of this style of music, this isn't the lane in that style that I typically go to, and it's kind of for a reason. I just think that this isn't really all that fun for me. It's not really all that engaging of an album. It's not like one of the worst things I've heard this year, but it's definitely like painfully average. Especially, again, given it gets off on a good foot. I think that the opener, Good Grief, has some really, really palpable intensity that I think really hooked me in and got me excited to listen to this. But I just was kind of bored to tears through the second half of this record in a way that I wasn't really expecting, but definitely kept me from coming back time and time again. I'm giving it a 5 because the musicianship on display is definitely competent. These guys definitely know what they're doing musician-wise. I just kind of wish there was a little more going on that was engaging to me personally.
That's just what I want. I want the full effects. I want to hit.
The last album I listened to was the new Muna self-titled album, the follow-up to the album that got me into them, Saves the World, and that album dazzled me with its great use of synths, its great chorus work, and how dense the production could feel at times. And I was excited to see these three continue pillaging on in that direction, and they definitely do on this self-titled album. But what I like about this is how lyrically it feels like this concise evolution of the songwriter. You know, this album is about self-liberation. It's about self-discovery. You know, it's an album that is very queer and very proud of that. And the sort of tribulations that can come from being openly queer and embracing that side of you that you may have put away or not necessarily embraced quite to the fullest. You know, it talks about love, loss of love, being single, the trappings that can come in being single, and the insecurities one might feel when on the market. You know, it's an album that has this growth of being proud while still learning about yourself amidst all of that. And I appreciate that, full stop, because beneath those lyrics that are really well constructed. You've still got that throttling kineticism that I loved in the synth pop stuff, and a lot of the airy balladry that stemmed from that as well. They also dip into some more twangy realms as well, like on Handle Me. I enjoy the imagery in a lot of this and how they, juxtapose that with, again, very apropos music. Runner's High is a song about breaking up with somebody, but it has the kineticism that can stem from a runner's high, building to that apex. The gravitas and strings of it all on Loose Garment is another moment where they sort of break it down to make it low-key while having this lyricism that just feels all the more personal, talking about wearing your sadness like a choker always forever around your neck. It's just a really sad image that is pulled together masterfully. I even like how they deviate from some of those outright cold synthesized tones to something a little more warm and earthy and almost humanized, like on Kinda Girl, which has this kind of acoustic country twang that I feel like kind of creeps up a little bit on the Closer Shooting Star as well, with some of those swells that happen in there. I don't know, I enjoyed this album a lot. It was everything I was hoping a follow-up to Saves the World would be, while having an even more of an ounce of personality or embracing oneself in a good way. Tracks like Silk Chiffon and What I Want, especially What I Want, are about embracing that queer identity and really loving yourself in a way that I think is very positive and very well put together. And I feel like if you listen to Muna's last album and you haven't checked out this self-titled, you're definitely sleeping on another fantastic outing from these three. I think that them signing independent didn't change a damn thing about them. I think that if anything, it was a smart move for them, because Phoebe Bridgers, who was a collaborator on Silk Chiffon, I definitely think understands what these three are wanting to make and can help them in ways that maybe RCA couldn't. I don't know. I love this. I love this album. I think it's a good prospect for these three, and I feel like if you love synth pop, if you love good catchy hooks, if you love great lyricism, listen to this album. It's fantastic. It's getting an 8 out of 10. Really adore it, and it's a really bold, well-constructed pop smash. And those were the albums I checked out this month. Did you like what I had to say? Did you not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, along with stuff that you've been listening to, stuff you think I should listen to. If you like this video, give it a like. If you want to see more on my music, gaming, and general notary content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join the ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community, it's linked in the description. I'm going to go, though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.